Hello, everyone, and welcome to Policy Bytes, the podcast where we dive into the future of platform engineering, cloud-native technologies, AI-powered automation, and of course, everything revolving around policy as code. I'm Courtney Nickerson, head of community at Nirmata, the creators of the Kyverno project, and one of your hosts for this series. I'm joined today by my co-host, Jim Bugwadia. Jim, welcome to Policy Bytes. How are you?
Thank you, Courtney. Doing well and really excited to have this conversation with Eric.
Yeah, it's going to be a great session. Just for those who are just now joining our Policy Bytes podcast, each episode of Policy Bytes is going to bring you real-world stories, expert insights, thoughtful conversations with engineers and architects, community contributors, and folks from around the ecosystem who are now shaping how modern Kubernetes platforms are built and secured. And obviously how they are also governed. So in this podcast, it's going to be brought to you by Nirmata, the creators of Kyverno. Jim, you've spent a lot of your career working on both the Kyverno project and at Nirmata. Do you want to tell us a little bit about those two things?
Absolutely. Yes, the one interesting factoid about Nirmata and Kyverno is we started our commercial business, Nirmata, prior to Kyverno, right? So it's not that we had an open source project and then decided to commercialize it, but working with very early users of Kubernetes. And initially we were consulting around microservices, containers, and then Kubernetes. We saw this, need in the community and with our user base about governance, right? And we're like, okay, like the main question that came up is Kubernetes, of course, has different users, developers, operators, security teams, all of whom are collaborating. And in many ways, it's the first platform that brought together all these roles and not only brought them together from a work perspective, but actually had a declarative configuration where everybody could collaborate, right? So the natural questions became, well, how do we govern and control all of this? And that led to some of the early ideas around Kyverno, which interestingly, the first version of Kyverno was also implemented in Java, like Kubernetes initially was. At one point, a Java project, but then as Kubernetes matured and then had features like admission controllers, CRDs, it made sense to make it native. And we decided to go all in with native policies, reporting, exceptions, and of course, now with cell adoption, further kind of continuing down that journey.
Yes, cell adoption, we're going to be talking about that a lot in the upcoming months, which is very, very exciting. So before we get started, I know that everybody listening in is really going to love today's episode. So be sure to subscribe to Policy Bytes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or anywhere that you subscribe to your favorite podcasts. You can also follow along, get involved, and try out everything Policy as Code by following Kyverno and Nirmata on LinkedIn, GitHub, and on our websites. So now moving on to today's guest. We are so excited to have this conversation. Today, we are joined by Eric Gattingby. He is a deeply respected engineer and open source contributor. He's known extensively throughout the community because he does so much open source work. He is part of the cert-manager community as well as a very active member in our Kyverno community. Eric, welcome. Your name comes up constantly across our ecosystem. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you even got started in this space.
Thank you, Courtney. Well, I've been doing software development for almost 30 years professionally. Many others I started by doing application developments, mostly in Java. I've always worked as a contractor, so I'm a partner in my own company together with some good colleagues. That's how I am employed. So I sell my services to major companies in Norway. And for the last 15 years, I've been working for Statnett, the Norwegian transmission system operator, starting out with application development there, moving over to more and more DevOps. And then the company was about to establish a Kubernetes platform, and I was asked if I wanted to join. And that's how I entered the Kubernetes ecosystem. So I've been involved in evolving, developing the Kubernetes platform at my customer for the last 8 years. I've always used open source. I've been a huge fan of open source even from the beginning. I thought it's a really nice way of collaborating between people that are interested in producing good quality software. And then we had a couple of use cases when building up this Kubernetes-based platform. So we run OpenShift clusters, which means that we have already some features on top of Kubernetes, but we wanted the users to meet something even simpler and with more value-added services. This led me into a lot of projects, of course. I think cert-manager was one of the first one because we needed some way of providing a workload identity, because there was a big project starting up where with microservices, where each microservice was supposed to get clear authentication and authorization towards the cluster. I mean, the application shouldn't have access to any data without explicitly allowed to. So we were in need of workload identity. We first started out with seeing if we could make Spirey or Spiffy work. But at that point, we didn't manage to make it run on our clusters. So we had to look for something else. Then we tried out cert-manager and managed to find a really nice way of using workload identity based on mutual TLS authentication. So I mean, building on the platform, I think we use most of the bigger community operators available, including Kyverno, of course, and external secrets operator. That's probably our most important operator in addition to cert-manager. So,
and you're a cert-manager maintainer.
That is correct.
Go from saying I kind of discovered and fiddled around with this cert-manager thing to becoming a full-time maintainer who also contributes to other projects and communities as much as you do?
That's a very good question. I guess it was a bit of a coincidence. When we started out with this, we had some challenges around trust distribution and also actually around enforcing policies for the use of our cluster issuers. A cluster issuer in cert-manager is an issuer which is installed by a cluster admin, which could be made available to the tenants running their workloads in the cluster. So we had a couple of challenges there. So I contributed something around the root CA distribution for an issuer. And I also had some meetings with the company called JetStack at the time, which was the company behind cert-manager, to discuss what they had available around and have policy enforcement for certificates. So I continued to contribute, and then a new side project to cert-manager called Trust Manager, which is specifically for distributing trusts, came, and then Approver Policy came, and I got deeply involved in both those side projects. And then I think it was part of the graduation process in the CNCF ladder for cert-manager, where I was actually asked if I wanted to become a maintainer, which I was very happy to get the ask, and I accepted it. So I am the most recent maintainer of cert-manager and the first maintainer who has not worked for either JetStack, Venafi, CyberArk, or Palo Alto Network, which is now the umbrella company for behind cert-manager. So
and now you're just stuck.
Yeah. But I love kind of the way a maintainer is an option to do things. There is nothing you have to do. I mean, I don't get paid for the work that I do on cert-manager, mainly. I have an arrangement with my customer, which allows me to make some income from contributions which are directly related to features or bug fixes or whatever that we need. But except from that, I really have to spend my free time. So it's more like my hobby to work on cert-manager. And I really love the other maintainers. They're very welcoming. And as the Kyverno maintainers, I think I know most of them. But that I appreciate a lot, that the community is kind of working on the social level as well, so that you're welcomed into the community, you're treated well, and you get help and you can help. All these things have to work well for a successful open source project.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that always is super important. And I think, the first time I saw your name, it was probably on some of the issues you filed. And you can tell, like reading through several issues, as maintainers typically have to do, right? Like the level of detail and the other effort that even goes into filing an issue on a project, to me, that is a contribution, right? So, and it's important because we, in the open source community, of course, we're relying on other users, the broader community, to give that feedback and to help improve the project and shape the project in many ways.
Yeah, I also think my role has been very important in actually being a user of the software, because not the other maintainers are mostly maintaining the code and trying to get feedback from the users. I'm actually a user, so.
That's a great point. Yeah, and Kyverno, when we started, of course, Open Policy Agent already existed. So the concept of policy was not something that we invented or made new, but our focus, like I was mentioning, was bringing it or making it as native to Kubernetes as possible, using CRDs for policies, for reporting, for exceptions. So that initial user feedback, and as with any new project, right? I mean, as developers, we always think of several good ideas, but whether the world needs it or accepts it or it becomes successful, there's a lot of questions along the way. So we had that hesitation too, to say, do we really need this? And is it going to bring value to the community and the space? And clearly that end user feedback is what motivated us to move forward and keep putting in effort and resources into the project itself. So I'm very curious, like what brought you to Kyverno? You mentioned about cert-managers being one of the first. Like what were some of the initial use cases you saw on OpenShift or other Kubernetes distributions?
Yeah, like Kyverno, I think our first use case was to use it to apply our own defaults on API fields. I mean, an API might have a default, but the nice thing about Kyverno was that you could install a policy, like a defaulting policy, to apply your default to certain fields. So if a user doesn't specify the field, it will get your default value instead of being unset or some default defined by the API. Is applied. That was kind of our first use case of Kyverno. And then later on, we have many use cases for it. I mean, we run on OpenShift, which is kind of secure by default. So there is not the typical need for Kyverno will be to apply quality security standards and the things alike, which is not that relevant when you run on OpenShift because it's well taken care of by OpenShift itself. So we use it mainly for creating policies for leading our users into using an API in a specific way, whether we want to kind of encourage them to use the API in a certain way, or the other thing is we want them not to use deprecated features that we want to remove. Like if we want to uninstall an operator that we kind of had for evaluation for some time, we want to avoid them using it, and we don't want to be disruptive, which usually puts us in a position where we put it in a warn audit mode and not the full enforce mode. And then later on, we can actually enforce things as well. We also use it to block access to proprietary OpenShift APIs because we are constantly evolving our use of OpenShift. We would love to try something else, at least another multi-tenant model where the tenant is given a cluster. So we provide the tools to mass produce clusters with value-added services instead of all tenants running in the same clusters, which has hundreds of nodes. That's what we use Kyverno for. And also, of course, reporting has become more and more important. With the policy reporter, it's been really a tool we couldn't be without to actually provide our users with the feedback that they need in order to figure out what they should do and kind of dig into their inventory to see how everything is going on, what is passing and what is failing and so on. So that's how we use Kyverno.
I love that you mentioned the policy reporter because we should take a moment to mention there's an open reports repo, which is open source, that is yet another, I guess, hobby of yours, Eric? Eric, and Jim, because you're both quite involved in open reports, and it's a newer project, but seen quite a bit of uptick, hasn't it? Tell us a little bit about how you ended up getting involved in that.
Oh, that's so interesting. I was so happy when I saw it. We have also created an image scanner operator as part of, we tried the Trivi operator because we wanted to scan the workload images running inside our clusters instead of relying on reports from pipelines. And so we wanted to scan the actual images running, because a big problem has been that the software has been neglected by the tenant or the user. Maybe the user is gone and the software is just running there. So we created our own image scanner operator, which we are using still. We created like a custom report of the vulnerabilities detected. And I know Trivi did the same. But then I realized that the policy reporter was actually able to visualize the reports from the Trivi CRDs, but we can use this because we didn't base ourselves on the Trivi CRDs. And then open reports came along, which made this a lot simpler, because now you can see like reports through to a single pane of glass from both Kyverno and from our own image scanner. So open reports has been really making our life a lot better. And I really believe in standardizing things. In this case, it allows you to use the same tool like Policy Reporter for viewing reports from completely different sources. And this is what I like about it. So that's how I got involved in it. But I only did some minor contribution. We're using server-side apply, so I think I contributed the apply configuration, which is a nice thing when you have software that is supposed to create reports or manage reports.
No, I love it. Because I'm certain that as we continue this conversation, there's going to be another open source project that you're involved in. And Jim also, Jim, you very much spearheaded the open reports as well, right?
I was, one of the folks who did. So this actually, the conversation started in the policy working group. So as many of you may know, like within the CNCF, there's special interest groups and working group in the Kubernetes, component of the CNCF. And then there's technical advisory groups or tags in the broader CNCF that look at things even beyond Kubernetes. So there was a policy working group that I, was a member of, and then eventually became a co-chair. And one of the tasks for the policy working group was to try and standardize, policy management. So the first thing we were trying to do is define what is policy management and what does it encompass, right? So clearly there's policy enforcement, which Kyverno or OPA or other policy engines do, but there's also reporting, there's exception management, there's several other workflows that are important. So the policy working group, wanted to standardize the reporting piece. The community agreed that made a lot of sense. And we had, done some work there, and Kyverno, of course, adopted that policy working group API. And then working groups, since they're meant to be temporary, we eventually, had to find a new home for the API and decided to create open reports, which now a number of different, organizations and commercial companies, and of course, community members like Eric are all contributing to and utilizing in products.
Very exciting to see.
There's one concern that comes to my mind, and that's kind of the distribution of the open report APIs. Because should that be delivered as part of Kyverno, or should it be delivered as part of some other software using open reports, or should it be installed separately, or should it be kind of enabled in Kubernetes? That would be awesome. I don't know how they did with Gateway API, which is kind of a similar thing where you have a common shared API for different provider of services.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, right? And there could be different versions too from different tools. So some things we do need to figure out in terms of how do we manage, at least across consumers and providers, the API version, and what is the best practice for that. So yeah, good conversations to have and figure out. But certainly at least the first step was standardizing the API and then providing some scaffolding and other tools around it.
Exciting times, exciting things coming up, I can already tell. So anyone who wants to get involved in open reports, now's your time. because it sounds to me like things are going to be taking off there very soon. So we talked a little bit about your career, your open source experience, how you discovered Kyverno, but let's talk a little bit about policy as code and your experience, because you're at a very unique vantage point. And I'm sure you've discovered this. Policies often kind of feel like they're invisible and running there in the background until something breaks. But in reality, in your experience, what do you think are the fundamentals that people actually should have in their cluster, especially when it comes to policies? What are the basics that they should have there? And why are policies so critical for Kubernetes users for security and identity and all of the different things that you can use them for?
I think I touched it. I said that we run on OpenShift, which has security built in, but I know if you run on something which is closer to the source, like closer to Kubernetes, you need something to ensure that your workloads are running safely. That's for sure. I mean, that's the obvious use case for software like Kyverno, to ensure that your workloads are properly set up with security context and not able to escape their runtime, their sandbox, and things like that. Apart from that, you could use policy. I mean, it just applies to so many use cases. It really depends on what you're trying to do. For certificates, you could probably use Kyverno for some of it, at least by looking at the certificate CRD, which is the main CRD in cert-manager, which allows you to get a signed certificate from some issuer. You could use Kyverno to enforce some policies on the fields which are visible in the CRD. But some of the fields are a bit more hidden, like it's part of the certificate signing request itself. So in this case, at least where I work, we use a specialized policy engine for certificates, which is provided by the cert-manager project called Approval Policy, which allows you to set constraints and restrictions on a more detailed level inside the certificates, which is very interesting. And this is an area where it's crucial to be in control, at least if you provide the infrastructure to sign your certificates. I mean, if a user comes with their own root CA and creates their own PKI underneath that root CA, I mean, in our cluster, a user is allowed to do that. That's not a problem. But in our case, we provide also a service which connects the PKI that we provide inside our cluster to the company internal PKI. So it's a PKI which is trusted by other parts, like almost everything, every IT running in the company is trusting the internal company root CA. So when you do that, it's extremely crucial that you know what you allow and what you don't allow. So that's what I had to say about that. That's another use case where it's really important to take control.
That makes sense. And certainly policy, of course, as a general term, can be applied at many different levels. And sometimes there is a need for that specialized, targeted policy for certain layers. But maybe stepping back a bit, obviously in the community, platform engineering is very much talked about. Curious to get your thoughts and perspective about how you see this evolution from DevOps to platform engineering, and then how policy, in your opinion, applies to that.
Yeah, I mean, our goal has been to create APIs which are as easy as possible for our end users to use, because the application developers are not particularly interested in doing so much DevOps. They want simplicity and not having to be an expert on Kubernetes and how you mount the volume and how you get everything in the right spot. So at least what we have been doing, and which I think is quite common, we have define like an application API where the application developers can define their applications that are supposed to run on our Kubernetes cluster in a more simplified way. And behind the scenes, we of course use a lot of operators, including cert-manager, external secrets operator, secret store CSI, a lot of things that you can get access to by twisting certain fields in the application spec. So as a minimum, the application developers must come with an image that the application should run on, and that's kind of the minimum. Just so the application has to have a name and an image. That's the only thing it needs to have. And then you can add an ingress by just turning a knob in the application resource, for example, which will provide you with an egress with a correct certificate, and you will get all the ports aligned, and to handle all the complexities that are there to make Kubernetes flexible. But for the application developer who doesn't really care, I just want to run my app. And I think that is kind of the idea behind platform engineering. But of course, we are getting some more advanced users who require some customization, which is a challenge to provide both. So we are trying to have at least two entry levels. So we have the kind of the simple entry level for people who don't care, I just want to run my app. And then we have another level for more advanced user where we provide a bit more customization on how things are set up.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, right? I was reading a post recently on LinkedIn from some folks who were previously in the Cloud Foundry community, and they were saying, and which is true in many ways, that Kubernetes and the CNCF ecosystem has tried to recreate perhaps that experience that was available with CF push maybe 10 years ago or 11 years ago. But I think that undercuts the value of Kubernetes, right? Because Kubernetes, the whole point was, and the challenge with Cloud Foundry was having an opinionated system where that opinion is decided by vendors instead of the community and the operations team, right? So it's that extensibility and flexibility that Kubernetes brings, which is fantastic, but also creates that complexity, which you have to deal with. And that's one of the reasons why we feel policy and policy as code is so much of a must-have, to help balance those two factors.
Yeah, you could say to one extent that the policy doesn't directly apply to what we mainly focus on in our platform engineering task, where this application is made so it satisfies all the policies that we eventually want to put into it, because the policies are built into the underlying operators and how we actually use them. But of course, for the more advanced entry level, where some users want to customize, we use policies a lot to ensure that they do things the way they should. That is our goal mainly. It's not so much about security, because the security is taken care of already. So
yeah, a policy-based automation, and it's interesting how there's even little things that Kyverno can do, which yield big benefits, right? Like just something as simple as inheriting labels from namespaces into workloads now lets you do like microsegmentation using CNIs, right? But if you don't do that, if you don't implement these, it's very hard to automate, and then leads to other challenges. So very interesting to kind of hear your experience on that as well.
Yeah, we're slowly moving into the public cloud. Most of our things have been running on-prem in our own clusters, but now we are trying to provide a platform based on the public cloud foundation, and I'm pretty sure that Kyverno and policies will be much more relevant in that case, because we have like the security department is asking us to provide the tools which makes our users do things the right way, and the answer to that is policies, I would say.
Good answer.
We'll see where we move with that, but that's going to be something we need, actually, for sure.
That's a you could see Jim think yep, good answer. That's what they built it for. I think it's so super interesting what you're talking about having the devs that just want to run their app and building different types of platforms for different types of situations. That kind of brings us into a whole new situation, which is AI and AI workloads. And we're obviously seeing a lot of AI-driven automation, but where do you see AI and automation having the biggest impact on certificate life cycles and certificate management, as well as policy governance?
Well, personally, I think I consider AI to be a bit immature still. I'm still waiting for it to be set on real important tasks. It's useful to get some input. I mean, you can ask it to evaluate a piece of configuration that you have, or ask it to create a configuration. But I think, at least to my experience, it's pretty far from doing something that is always working and which is maintainable. So I think it will still take some years before you probably have to have some kind of specialized model underneath in order to do more important work. Maybe that's available already, but I haven't seen it. So to my experience, it's a bit immature now. I still have to wait some time. I've asked it to create a Kyverno policy, for instance. I was trying to specify. It was full of mistakes. I mean, it didn't even follow the APIs, which I think is a bit disappointing.
Super interesting topic, and something that I've been, personally also involved with at Nirmata. To your point, what we started seeing in the community about 2 years ago is somebody where there would be some posting of a policy and saying, hey, this doesn't work. And we're like, well, these are invalid keywords, right? It was like, where'd you get this policy from? And of course, folks would try with, any one of the available AI tools to generate policies. And, so we started looking at that problem space too and said, okay, can we do better? Because a lot of our enterprise customers want to write policies, create tests for policies, use tools like Chainsaw to do full automation. So, we have a policy as code agent, which we just announced at the last KubeCon, which is trained on Kyverno and which, in our benchmark so far, and we're still training it on some of the newer policy types, but for the existing cluster policy types, it gets to about 95 to 98% accuracy, right? Which is much better than what we've seen with some of the other AI tools where they're like 40 to 60%, and it doesn't know all the nuances of the versioning and things like that. So still some work in progress, but the tool is free to download. It's called NCTL or Nirmata Controller. You can try it out, and it has a AI agent built in to be able to generate policies and test policies.
That's really cool. I want to try that because I'm suspecting that you need a specialized model in order to do this correctly. Because at least from my attempts to use ChatGPT or Copilot or anything, it's just suggesting invalid things, which is worthless.
Right. Yeah, because it gets confused otherwise on the version of the policy, or it can't distinguish between whether the document is still valid or invalid, things to that nature, right? So there's a lot of context engineering that has to be carefully done. But feel free to try it out and give us your feedback. Would love to hear how it does and also where we can improve.
Do you think that at any point you will provide like a free form policy where you can just write what you want your policy to do in text, and that's the kind of the declarative definition of it?
I think so, right? Because I think more and more, and just in software in general, right? So the task of producing software from a set of inputs is what we all do today. And we translate, some input document, whether it's a requirements document or design document, ultimately to code. So more and more what we're seeing is that, the translation to code can be automated. There's obviously a lot of work to be done, and some things work better than others. But then it comes back to, creating that verifiable feedback loop and to help, improve that code that has been automated, and also understanding the domain, right? So I see definitely, and we're even within, the team at Nirmata, now we've sort of combined domain and product management expertise with engineering. So we're all product engineers, right? We're no longer just, I think maybe 20 years ago, you could say, I know Java or I know C++, and that's all I focus on, right? I'm expecting somebody else to know the domain. But these days, because the language part has become more and more easier, you still have to know the language, you still have to know some advanced features and what to use when, but it's that domain expertise that matters more, right? So it's that blurring of roles that we're starting to see, which is super interesting.
Yeah, but that's not a new thing. I mean, during my career doing application development, I found the most effective and best programmers to be the ones that understand the domain.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, one of the things I often share also internally is when I started my career, which was at Motorola in the telecom space, we had to take about 6 months of training for RF. And I was like, okay, I'm a software engineer. I know C++. Why should I learn how radio waves work? But it was mandated, right? It was like, if you don't know that, why are you working in the telecom or the wireless space, right? So domain expertise was a must-have. But I think somewhere along the lines, we kind of went into this whole agile delivery and ticket-driven model, even for development, where it was, okay, just tell me exactly what I have to produce, which diluted that, that philosophy.
But I think you still see it very much reflected in real life. When you're talking to teams, there's always a bunch of people who jumped in and they do a lot of coding, but then they always have somebody senior who has been there working in that particular part of a project for a handful of years, who actually okays the PR and gives everybody the feedback and helps them learn and grow and become more in tune with what it is that they're actually building on top of. And you see that as well in open source projects. Both of you are very much senior folks in the community who give feedback on issues and PRs and give people the context around, no, we need you to do it this way because the underbelly of this project is built in this way, and it's built this way because, and then people learn and realize, oh, okay, and then their next PR is much better. So I think we still see the reflection of the need to have people who are domain experts in order to make things function appropriately, right? That said, I do also think that with the world of AI, it has facilitated a lot of folks to believe that they're domain experts. When that might not actually be the case. And a lot of other people, myself, I use AI a lot in order to understand the domain, right? It's like, explain this to me as if you're a domain expert, because I'm really trying to understand the underworkings, or explain this code base to me because I can get up to speed much faster by using it. But I think we still see that hierarchy, and hopefully it continues to stay that way.
I think that is a good use case, which is actually working right now. It's much easier to show a piece of code or an error message to some AI model and get an explanation. The opposite, it's not there yet. I mean, you cannot state the problem and then AI will propose the code to fix it.
Yeah, and even there, even if you can articulate the problem, I think ultimately it's kind of painstakingly detailed, right? So at that point, you might as well write the code sometimes. So there's a trade-off there. But one other interesting thing that comes to mind is somewhere I was reading that at one point, several decades ago, before there were computers and before banks were automated or used technology, there was an actual job of a human computer, like humans who would do the math every night to reconcile the book, and they were called computers, which I was like, okay, that's interesting, right? Because that was a job. You could be a computer. And now, like, if we can't even fathom that. Imagine applying, for a job as a computer and just doing math every day, because we have machines do that, right?
Oh my gosh. I feel like people who work in cloud native already have enough difficulty explaining what their job is. Imagine if you're like, no, I'm a computer.
Yeah.
I'm a computer. I can just imagine my family's whole, like, their face just glaze over, like, what?
Yeah. So who knows? In 20 years, we might say the same thing about coding. Like, there were people who would actually write code, right? And imagine
and they were
that.
all coders. Yeah.
But anyways, like, on that, like, where do you see the future of CNCF and Kubernetes heading in your experience, or what would you like to see? What are some of the exciting, kind of trends you're seeing? And
that's a difficult question. I mean, Kubernetes, I consider it to be quite mature, and it's so much in use. So it's extremely hard to change anything at all. I mean, even things that are not working in Kubernetes is not fixed, because it will break all the downstream users of it. So I'm not sure where Kubernetes. I think they're on a good path now, trying to clean up some of the really bad designed things, like the volumes. They've kicked out to a lot of specialized volumes, which adds a lot of dependencies to Kubernetes. So they're doing some important things there, and I was really happy to see the validating policies and mutating policies arriving. That was super, and I'm really happy that Kyverno kind of adopted them immediately and providing value-added services on top of what Kubernetes provides. I was also kind of dreaming about Kubernetes taking some of the features from cert-manager to be built in, because I mean, certificates is something you need for sure, and having to install like a foreign operator for some cert-manager might feel a bit foreign and so not something you want in your cluster necessarily, but you need the features that cert-manager provide, like in particular for operator webhooks. You need to have certificates. So you need some kind of mechanism. I believe Kyverno has written something custom to issue certificates for the webhooks.
Yeah, no, like all good points. And like it's, again, going back to finding that balance between opinionated but flexible. And it's hard to do for a project as mature as Kubernetes at this point. So one thing you mentioned on the validating admission policy, and that's maybe a good one to talk about a little bit more. So clearly, I even from the Kyverno perspective, we're very excited to see policy become first class in Kubernetes, right? That was very much needed. But and again, like the benefits in terms of what the Kyverno project brings is to make that easy to adopt and to extend that to other aspects, like with the built-in policies. They only, of course, apply at admission controls. Kyverno also can do background scans, and we've been expanding now even to run off cluster. So I'm not sure if you've tried some of the the features of even running Kyverno outside of Kubernetes, but we want to make validating admission policies and cell-based policies available to every component of your infrastructure and application stack.
That's cool. Yeah. Does that mean that you can use Kyverno policies like you can use OPA or conf test will be similar? You can use it for files that have some configuration, for instance?
Absolutely. So you can use Kyverno for Terraform, for JSON. Shaladva and I did a session at the last KubeCon where we showed Kyverno for authorization. We're working on, there is already a Kyverno for MCP, for agent gateway, and we're working with even the Envoy gateway to integrate for the MCP protocol. So any JSON or YAML payload, now you can apply Kyverno policies, which are all in the familiar, they all look like a validating policy, which is all based on cell, right? So it really makes the cognitive load on platform engineers a lot easier.
Yeah, I just want to say that's the reason we chose Kyverno over Gatekeeper and OPA, because we tried a bit with Rego, and it's a good language and it's highly usable, but we're not familiar with it. I mean, that's why we trended towards Kyverno instead, because it has some similarities with tools that we already know. And now, especially with Cell, which has become more and more important, we use it in our own operators to add validation expressions to our CRDs and so on. So it's a thing that it's getting more and more familiar to Kubernetes community, which is great.
Totally agree.
I was going to say, you'll be one of our first to migrate your policies into our new cell policy types.
Yeah, we still have some challenges that are unresolved, so I have to talk with some of your maintainers.
Oh, happy to do that.
So just a couple of questions to wrap up. First, what advice would you give, Eric, to platform engineers that are just beginning to adopt both certificate automation and policy as code?
Should try to be involved in the open source communities. File issues, I mean, you could always start somewhere, like file issues, write documentation, try contributing to the project, maybe join the community meetings. I think most of the people that we are welcoming to the cert-manager community meetings things, find it very welcoming and very interesting just to be there, just to listen to the discussions going on. And so get involved. That's kind of my first advice. And of course, embrace the model in Kubernetes, which is control loops, level-based reconciliations, and all these beautiful things that you can use for so much. Having your declarative resources, trying to really understand what that means to you and the software that you're actually using.
And I know we were talking earlier before we jumped on about KubeCon EU coming up. I know you often give talks, especially at Maintainer Summit and whatnot. Do you have any upcoming talks or conference sessions that you'll be giving, or any conferences that you'll be attending that you're excited about?
Yeah, I'm really excited about KubeCon EU in March in Amsterdam. I'll definitely be there. I'll be staffing the kiosk, cert-manager kiosk that we have requested. I really love to be on the pavilion there to talk with users, to contributors, maintainers of other projects. And so that's where I'm going to hang around during KubeCon mostly. I have submitted one talk together with one of the Kyverno maintainers, Mariam, which I hopefully will be accepted to KyvernoCon. And I'll be also hosting a Contrib Fest, cert-manager Contrib Fest, which was a huge success in London earlier this year. It allows us to get new contributors on board, which has contributed a lot to the project. And also we have a proposal for the maintainer track on the conference where I might participate, but I had my slot in London, so there might be some other maintainer we haven't decided yet. So that's on my plans. And I'm also maybe hoping to go to KubeCon Japan in July.
Oh.
We are using an open source project which was created by a Japanese cloud provider called Shibusu, which the software is called Accurate, which allows you to create namespace hierarchies. It's similar to hierarchical namespace controller, which was part of Kubernetes 6, but has now been archived. I would love to go there and have a talk with one of the other maintainers from Japan. I'm actually a maintainer of Accurate as well, which is great.
You called it, Courtney. There was another open source project.
There's always another one.
I was just going to say, and give him a little bit of time. The next time you come back to do your second episode with us, you'll be telling us about hopefully another. It's amazing to have people like you in the community who participate so widely. It's also makes everything that much richer and deeper as well. The cross-pollination that happens when people like yourself go to different projects and give your viewpoints about how things can work it's incredible. It's fantastic.
I'd just like to say thanks to Nirmata and Kyverno. I think it's a great community. And I was really happy to see you arriving to the project, Courtney, because you are in a role that the cert-manager project has been inspired by what you're doing for the Kyverno project. So we are hoping to get someone in a similar role, trying to build the community and allow the community to grow in a healthy direction, which you are doing as far as where I stand. It looks like it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Courtney is inspirational for quite a few people in the community, and awesome to see that grow.
I got a question the other day. How many maintainers do you have on Kyverno which isn't working for Nirmata or hasn't been working for Nirmata?
So right now, I believe we have about 6 from Nirmata and maybe like 3 who are external. Yeah. But yeah, at one point, what happened about a year or so ago, and we have hired a lot of maintainers and end users, by the way, who started in the community, like Charlotte, Frank, Miriam started as a LFX mentee and then became a maintainer. So we have quite a few folks go through that journey as well. But yeah, so of course, people who love the domain and love the space and initially start as end users, but then want to be more part of the project and community. For us, that's a fantastic fit as well.
I think that's a more sustainable model than just having maintainers from the company behind, because I mean, we discussed a lot this in cert-manager project.
Yeah.
Most of the maintainers are motivated to work on cert-manager because they're employed by the company behind. Not all of them, but most of them, which makes the project a bit at risk, because you never know what happens to the company and what prioritizations the company takes in with regards to open source.
That makes sense. Yeah, and we do have other platforms now incorporating and building on Kyverno, like Alibaba just announced, and Kyverno is part of their admission control process. So we're part, like in their official kind of release stream. Same thing with like Kubernetes, I believe, and Giant Swarm. They have kind of embedded Kyverno in their platforms. So we are starting to see more and more like even other vendors incorporate Kyverno, and there's like even, by the way, the NVIDIA DGX cloud, if you just search their docs, Kyverno is mandatory as part of their installation, which is fantastic, right? So we get a great way to kind of, get more feedback and grow the community.
For sure.
I'm so glad that you asked about external maintainers. I think we're actually up to 5 if we count for sub-projects. So we have maintainers for sub-projects that are external, but in the maintainer call today, they're opening a vote for another one who is going to probably join us from a company located in Asia. So we are seeing more and more community members coming from that side of the world, which is also super exciting.
It's great that you have maintainers from all around the globe, which is
it's fascinating.
Cool. Yeah,
it's my favorite part of our project. It is fascinating, the way everybody comes together around something that they all very much believe in, but also with so many different ideas and experiences, and the way they manage each other's cultural differences as well is in such a natural way. It's fascinating to be in their meetings sometimes. I
really guess it's challenging to find meeting times which is suitable for everyone.
Yeah, there's always somebody who's half asleep, either because they just got up or because they're finishing their day.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you so much for joining us today, Eric. This has been a super fantastic talk. The time went by very, very quickly. I really appreciate you sharing all of your experience, not just professionally, but your community experience as well with us. It's been fantastic. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely.
Thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to talk more about interesting stuff when we meet, hopefully at KubeCon next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be there. Thank you, Eric. Thanks, Courtney.
We will be there and hopefully see you at KyvernoCon.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm crossing my fingers.